politics, and more. Roshini's website, ownyourwow.com. Roshini Rajkumar joins me now. Good morning, Roshini. How are you?
Good morning, Jimmy. Thanks so much for having me on.
Thanks for coming on. It's always great to check in with you and get your perspectives. I mean, look, we had an object that was in the air known as a spy balloon for days. Finally, it was shot down after it got to the ocean and wasn't over any American land. And then yesterday, you have this object, unknown origin, unknown type of object, what would normally get the UFO folks going crazy. Oh my gosh, look what we have. It's an alien, perhaps. I don't think that's the case, but now we're not talking about that. We're talking about, well, what is it? Was it staged by the Biden administration? Was it, a foreign object from China or from Russia? So what do you make of this?
Well, first of all, I really hope it wasn't staged. But one of my first thoughts was, as I sit here in the state of Minnesota, thank goodness that thing wasn't over my state. I don't think it's a good idea for the president to either be trigger happy or to appear as he's being trigger happy. That's what we say even in the law. The appearance of a conflict is just about as bad as the conflict itself. So bad optics are never good for you, especially if you're the president of the United States. The reports that I've read are that we don't know exactly what that was. How and why would we be shooting down something when we don't even know what it is? Don't we need to do a little more fact gathering? So I'm concerned, and especially if it's because he is concerned about the backlash from how he handled the Chinese spy balloon. So there are just a lot of things that don't connect the dots correctly here, Jimmy. And when it comes to crisis management, you have to have a plan. You can't just be trigger happy. I'm sorry, but that's the only term I can come up with right now as I try to assess this situation.
It's interesting you are looking at it from the perspective, he might seem trigger happy, whereas those who may be more supportive of this type of action could say, well, he let the Chinese spy balloon go over our territory for way too long. This time, I'm guessing whatever the object was, wasn't responsive. It was now at about 40,000 feet. So it was an area where they felt it was of greater concern and then took action. There were those who might say, well, actually, he did what he should have done with the Chinese spy balloon this time, acted more quickly.
Yeah, I mean, that is fine. It's just it's fine to have that assessment, but I guess I'm concerned about, I didn't hear enough about, well, what would be the peripheral damage? You shoot this down at the 40,000 number. I mean, all of those kinds of things I don't think were really at least discussed. And maybe they were discussed before the decision was made, and we, the American people, don't have all those details, and sometimes we can't have all those details if, indeed, this was a matter of national security. But really, the main thing is I now start wondering, how often is this going to happen over our skies? Not just an alleged balloon, but that we really do have to worry over every state in America that something's going to get shot down over our land and what the civilian repercussions are for that.
Roshini Rajkumar, let's look at one other aspect of this, and that is how the American people may be viewing this object being shot down yesterday through the lens of the Chinese spy balloon, and specifically how Biden handled that, because whether he should have shot that down sooner or not, I'm kind of convinced that he didn't need to until it got over the Atlantic Ocean, that it was fine to allow it to stay. But the optics, the American people were talking about this. It was a buzz. It was Biden was taking inaction, not action, but inaction. And we had a Chinese Communist Party spy balloon over our skies. So when you look at that week and the way that was, the impressions from that, and you look at what we saw yesterday, how do you think this plays out for the American people?
Yeah, well, there again, you need to have a plan. And I think the Chinese situation, and, you know, I'm probably a little bit more in your boat on the analysis of that. But we do see that the parties are politicizing the timing of his reaction. And, of course, that's always going to happen. We are in America, and the parties play politics. But now it's sort of like, because that happened, Jimmy, we can't get around the fact than any other time something similar or something that's perceived to be similar to the Chinese balloon situation is going to get American people reaction and scrutiny, more scrutiny. So that is something that the Biden administration and his spokespeople really need to anticipate and think about. And then remember, nothing happens in a vacuum. The State of the Union address just happened. And so you're always thinking about what kind of messaging before and after that. Is it a great opportunity to do X, Y, or Z because that either just happened or is about to happen? So I really do wish politicians would do things and act on behalf of the American people only because they are in that real moment acting on the best half or in behalf in the best way of the American people. But unfortunately, our leaders have gotten to the place where they are doing things maybe for their own brand or their own name. And in fact, in upcoming crisis files, we talk about that. It's called Leadership Vacuum. And we do get into what is happening with our candidates as well as our office holders in this country. And why do they make decisions? And do they really even think about what's best for the American people? So I think we have to look at this situation, Jimmy, that we're talking about now on your show through that lens. Is what the president is doing best for the American people, or is it simply to carry out some kind of PR agenda for his own administration? Now, you always have to worry about optics when you're the president, but you should first be thinking about the American people and actual national safety.
Roshini Rajkumar, our guest, host of the Crisis Files podcast. I want to shift gears, but staying on Joe Biden, President of the United States. He gave his State of the Union address on Tuesday night. One odd part, and there's some music towards the end of this clip, but one odd part of the speech, but fitting with the tone, was when he yelled something about Xi Jinping that made no sense to me.
But in the past 2 years, democracies have become stronger, not weaker. Autocracy has grown weaker, not stronger. Name me a world leader who changed places with Xi Jinping. Name me one.
Now, to me, most of his speech was yelling sort of kind of like that, which I found rather odd. I noticed a scowl on his face throughout probably 2/3 of the speech as I was watching it. But from your perspective as a communication professional who works with and coaches all sorts of folks on presentation, on addressing crises, on various things dealing with crisis management, political strategy, and so forth, what did you make of his persona and presentation in his speech?
Yeah, I mean, there's a part of me, and I really do try to be as objective as possible, Jimmy, because I've come on your show in the past. I am not a big fan of President Biden. It has nothing to do with his party. And I don't think the delivery is strong when you have to seem like you are yelling or screaming. You know, look, you're in one of the branches of our government where it operates. It should be a civil place. It's a place, of course, for open discourse. But, you know, calm down. You're the President of the United States. Your delivery, both visually and verbally, vocally, should be strong, yet not shouting, not questionable, not defensive. So I don't give him high marks for delivery for that speech. That said, there's a lot going on. There were a lot of weird things happening in that chamber that night. I think there were some things that were absolutely out of bounds and should not have happened as far as reaction from the crowd. So it was a very strange State of the Union, in my opinion.
Well, let's talk about reaction from the crowd. Here's just a little tidbit of the most prominent reaction point on Social Security.
Some of my Republican friends want to take the economy hostage. I get it, unless I agree to their economic plans. All of you at home should know what those plans are. Instead of making the wealthy pay their fair share, some Republicans want Medicare and Social Security to sunset. I'm not saying it's a majority.
And it went on, and of course there was agreement that was reached, but the reality is that Joe Biden was really emphasizing this point, and it was not true. It is not, he was making it as though it was something that Republicans were prioritizing. And it is far from that. And indeed, the vast, vast majority of Republicans don't really even want to touch Social Security, Roshini Rajkumar. So I can't blame Republicans, at least in that point, for reacting very harshly and audibly to what Biden was saying, especially on an issue that is so touchy politically that we call it the third rail of American politics, Social Security and Medicare.
Yeah, I guess I have less issue with the groaning and grumbling as I do with the term liar that was shouted out, which was absolutely unacceptable. But I agree with you. That was a false statement. And in my mind, why are the president's speechwriters putting language in there that is either patently false or for sure conjures up negative and false imagery? That was unacceptable on the president's side. So and then what happens, I'm an ex-TV news reporter, and we were taught very early on, if you get the little facts wrong, no one's going to believe you on the big stuff. Well, this was a big stuff kind of a piece, right? So that's an even bigger egregious mistake, a factual error in the words of your speech. So there were just so many things about that State of the Union that I had issues with when it comes to the choreography, the layout of the speech, as well as actual messaging that was said. And I remember a time, and maybe I was more impressionable in my younger days, Jimmy, but I remember a time when my family and I would sit down to watch the State of the Union. It was appointment television. And I had to kind of make myself this time around, right? And it was very difficult. It wasn't something I was looking forward to, whereas it used to be that. Now it's gotten into be something, and I'm not just saying the Democrats. Trump did this too, where it isn't what it was meant to be. And it starts with the observers, the members of the Congress that are sitting in there, who should absolutely have respect for their own venue and for the history and tradition of the State of the Union, and take some of the fights and the grumbling and the terrible faces. The Speaker of the House and the Vice President are sitting behind the President. Their faces are on there just as much, almost, as the President on any given night. This is absolutely the time for game face or poker face.
Roshini Rajkumar, our guest, host of The Crisis Files. Follow them on Twitter and access podcasts at The Crisis Files on Twitter. Let's go to M&M's before we wrap up. Tomorrow is the big game, and, of course, that means you're going to get all of these fun Super Bowl commercials. Well, M&M's, of course, put their spokes candies on ice in the back of the freezer when this happened. I was hosting the radio. I think I was filling in. I had you on. We talked a bit about it. It was pretty crazy in terms of some kind of a publicity move. And then they've gone even further with it in a way that I just think is a floundering campaign. So it looks like this is the tone, or maybe these are the actual ads that you will hear during the Super Bowl. Here's a taste. They replaced the spokes candies with comedian actress Maya Rudolph.
Hi again, America. Since we all love M&Ms, and let's face it, me, it only makes sense that I am renaming America's favorite chocolate candies Ma and Yas. Ma and Yas. It's a play on my name. First, I put my face on them. Then, I changed the name. Then I thought, what does the world really want? Clams. That's why Ma and Yas will now be filled with chewy, chunky clams. They're clamderful.
And now all their social media, YouTube, Facebook, etc., is Ma and Yas with her face on an M&M as the image. Look, I know we're talking about it, so they are getting we're being talked about play over at M&M's, but isn't this increasing publicity stunt just ridiculous? Like, those ads are not even funny.
Exactly. It is ridiculous. And we're getting away from, when you have a brand that is so universal, global, loved, delicious, like all these things that are positive words, why would you mess that up? The challenge for a brand like that is just to stay with the times, get creative, have some fun. Look, they're M&Ms, they're little chocolate candies. We're not solving world peace with this. But when you completely try to flip the script on something that didn't need that, I've really got to question what those ad executives are doing over there.
Look, you've worked with and advised Fortune 500 companies. What kind of mindset would bring them into this campaign where not only do they pull the stunt with regards to the M&Ms, but then their replacement has these ads that, let's be quite frank, they're lame.
To put it bluntly, they are lame. I cannot even understand it because you don't mess with something that seems to be going well. I mean, if anything, I'm just longing to watch little M&Ms with legs and talking to me. I mean, that's what I hope gets revealed tomorrow. Like maybe there's some big ad waiting to come out because this was really the wrong campaign, Jimmy.
Yeah, clams? Who in the world plays with clams? Real quick, anything else that you have seen or are expecting as far as Super Bowl commercials?
Well, I think one thing that's really an interesting point for your listeners to note is that we will see no crypto ads. So all of this controversy around cryptocurrency and the lawsuits and all of this, both criminal lawsuits as well as civil lawsuits against like the Tom Brady's, the Madonnas of the world who were celebrity endorsers. So the Super Bowl just said no crypto ads. I think that's interesting.
Roshini Rajkumar, author of the book Communicate That, now in its third edition, and host of the Crisis Files podcast. Wherever you get your podcast, it's always great to talk with you and get your analysis and perspective. Thanks so much, and enjoy the big game tomorrow.
You too, Jimmy. Have fun.
You as well. Once again, Roshini Rajkumar joining us. Check out her website, ownyourwow.com.